In the know.
Good evening, everyone.
In the know.
Tony Reeves, Tony Reeves, Tony Reeves, Tony Reeves, fire. Following the news in any way, shape, or form. No shortage of things to talk about. What does it mean? What will it bring? Is this a reality we simply have to accept? Tony Reeves, fire. Tony Reeves. Let's go ahead and get started.
All right. I want to take a moment to talk a little bit about migraines. For those of you who've never experienced a migraine before, it may be easy just to discount it as just a really, really bad headache. But trust me, if you've had a migraine, and let me be blunt, I've never had one, but almost every one of my clients that I've represented that have had migraines have given me very detailed descriptions of how rough it is. It's easy to think that a migraine is just merely a bad headache. It is so much more. So when you're talking about migraines and trying to show how having migraines may cause you to be disabled, it can get a little tricky. So here's a couple of things that you need to understand. First, everyone's condition in terms of their migraines are unique. Now there's going to be some commonalities. Usually the headache being of such intensity that anything like noises and lights and things like that may make it worse and everything. The desire to be in a quiet, dark location and so forth like that. That's kind of a basic thing for some people. But a lot of times when you're having a migraine, it can be so much worse. So when you are trying to demonstrate that your migraines play a part in disabling you, here's a few things you need to keep in mind. First, you need to be able to discuss how long they last. Let's be real here. You're probably not taking the time to time how long those things are. I got you. We there. But the reality is that if you don't keep some type of journal, now mind you, it doesn't have to be you. It could be somebody who's in your household. If you can't really quantify how long it's going to last, it's kind of hard for Social Security to get an idea of the intensity. And be realistic about this, people, because I've seen people who have said, oh, I've had a migraine and it's lasted for 5 or 6 days straight and it happens every week. I said, so basically what you're telling me is that only 1 or 2 days out the week you can function. So how is it you're talking to me now? Oh, it just so happens I'm wearing a groove. And I'm like, be realistic. Chart. When does it kick in to the level where you can't do anything? Meaning you have to go into a dark room, you have to shut the door, you put in a cold compress, you don't have to have anybody around you. When are you at that level? And then when are you at that point where the situation has improved to the point where you're able to do something? You might not be at full strength, you may still have the residual headache, but the intensity is not so bad where you can't do anything. And chart that. Not only how long does it last when you have it, how often do you have those periods of time? Also, what causes them? Do they come on unannounced? Are they stress-induced? Are there certain temperatures or certain extremes that causes those things to happen? What other medical conditions do you have that causes you to experience this? Like maybe if you have fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome or something like that, where when you start having a spike in your pain levels, then all of a sudden that kicks that in too. Describe that as well. Also, what makes them worse? Meaning, tell Social Security if there's any particular stressor, whether it be environmental, whether it be physical, mental. Tell them if there's circumstances out there that makes your situation and those migraines worse. Also, how long do they last? And I mentioned that before. The first time when I was saying how long do they last, I'm talking about when you have one set migraine. When you have a migraine, how long does that one migraine last? But when I mean by how long do they last now, I'm asking, how often are you having those migraines? Meaning, if you say, I got a migraine and when it hits me, I'm down for 4 to 5 hours. How often does that happen during a week? How often does that happen during a day? How often does it happen during a month? And you want to make sure you chart those things out accordingly. Okay? Now, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, I'm going to talk to you about a few other things that you can do that you must discuss with Social Security in terms of discussing your severity of your migraines. I hope it helps. Stay tuned. Be right back, and we'll talk about this a little bit more.
Under the Social Security regulations, representatives are permitted to practice before the administrative agency anywhere in the country, which means that when you're looking for a representative, you can find someone who doesn't necessarily have to be in your state if you're just going before the administrative agency. So it's possible to have an attorney or representative who's from Utah, even though you may be in Georgia. And our office is actually no different. So if you're wondering which states we cover, check this out. Now the tricky part is once you have to sue the Social Security Administration. Under that situation, you want to have an attorney that's representing you in your jurisdiction. So if you have a representative who's in another state and you've gone all the way to the appeals council and you've been denied and you want to sue the Social Security Administration, you make sure you ask that representative whether or not they can sue someone in that particular state.
Welcome back, everybody. Let's get rocking and rolling, talking a little bit more again about migraines. All right. So I talked to you previously about some of the things that you needed to demonstrate for purposes of showing the severity of your migraines. I talked about how long do they last in terms of per day, or how many times you have them per week. I talked about what causes them, what makes them worse. Now, also, what do you do to get relief? Now, I've had people say this before. Oh, I can't do anything. Now listen, I don't want to disrespect you, but you do something. Okay, it may not cause you to have instant relief. It may only give you a minimal amount of relief. But trust me when I tell you this, you do something to give yourself some measure of relief. What is it that you do? Okay, so what you want to do is you want to be able to say, what steps do you take? What things do you do to give yourself some semblance of relief? Okay, so you want to make sure, whether it be putting a cold compress, whether it be taking medication, whether it be going into a dark room, whether it be you telling everybody don't speak to you for a few minutes, something. You want to make sure you break that thing down accordingly. All right. What symptoms do you experience? People, do not underestimate how powerful it is for you to describe the level of symptoms. Let me be honest. I've never had a migraine, so I cannot tell you what that sensation feels like. But you can. You can say that it's so intense it feels like a hammer hitting you in your head. It causes you to be disoriented. It causes you to be queasy and nauseous. You've thrown up and so forth. And that the intensity is such a level that your eyes hurt. If you don't paint a picture for the person who's never experienced this, then how are they going to get an appreciation of how severe that is? More importantly, they're going to want to know, well, man, when you have that sensation, how long does that last? Now, also, what medications do you take? And most importantly, do they help? Because this is important. If you're taking medications and they don't help, the next follow-up question is going to be, well, have you told your doctor? Well, why hasn't your doctor changed it? You got to be prepared to explain those things. Finally, what documentation do you have regarding supporting this? Meaning, are you going to a neurologist or a rheumatologist? Are you going to any type of doctor who's following you up with regards to the severity of your condition? You want to be able to point to the records as to someone who can just indicate how severe the migraines are, which is why it's so important that when you're talking to your doctors, you're telling them everything that I just mentioned. How long do they last? What causes them? What makes them worse? What medications are you taking if they're helping? What symptoms you're experiencing? What happens when you're taking the medication? Does it relieve the symptoms? Does it only relieve a few of the symptoms? Does it relieve any of the symptoms? Okay? Remember this. Also, if you have migraines, it's not uncommon. It is not uncommon for those conditions to coexist with another condition. What do you mean? Well, most people that I represent, I've never represented, well, let me rephrase that. I haven't in years represented someone who's just migraines only. It's usually migraines with some other physical impairment that typically causes the migraines to be worse. So whether it be something like Sjogren's disease or TMJ or fibromyalgia, something like that. So make sure you explain how the two interplay with each other. Keep in mind, you bear the burden of proving you're disabled. Migraines are not simple cases. So if you're saying that your migraines causes you limitations that prevent you from being able to do certain things, it's important that you have the medical documentation to support what you're saying and that you do a very detailed job outlining what those limitations are so that the decision maker, Social Security, will be able to fully appreciate how your migraines limits your ability to do things.
I want to thank all of you for engaging in the videos. Make sure you take the opportunity to send me any comments or send me any particular questions that you want me to have addressed here. As you know, this show is for you, and so the only way I can make sure that I can provide you some good information is if you provide me some good questions. Keep them coming, and right here on Q&A, Social Security Disability Today.